Viewers of this channel will know that I have a fondness for questions for atheists. And by fondness, I mean sarcasm in my heart for them. Anyway, you'll be happy to know I found some new questions for atheists. The 6 items times however many sub-questions is on this webpage from Be Set Free Choose Jesus Ministries or whatever, which the first time I read the URL I thought of as beset. So, choose your URL wisely. And then on the other side of this page, we see the great questions of life. And you know what? They're not that great. You're going to be surprised to know they're not that great. And at the bottom of the page, we have this declaration powered by God's love for us. Let's get going. Hi, my name is Scarlett, and I'm an atheist and skeptic, and yes, questions for atheists. Don't we love to hate them? Don't we love to make sarcastic comments about them? Yes, mwah, chef's kiss. Let's get started. So the intro, 6 questions to ask an atheist. Spoiler, there are more than 6. I know you're surprised. Anyway, the intro reads, many times as Christian theists, we find ourselves on the defensive against the critiques and questions of atheists. Sometimes in the midst of arguments and proofs, we miss the importance of conversation. These questions then are meant to be part of a conversation. They are not in and of themselves arguments or proofs for God. They are commonly asked existential or experiential questions that both atheists and theists alike can ponder. I find this intro very telling. Why are you on the defensive? Why do you think that you have to defend your beliefs? Why can't you just have a conversation around them? Maybe your beliefs don't have a good basis. Or maybe you just think that everybody should agree with you and pat you on the back for your brilliant big-sized brain or something like that. I also find myself having discussions with people where we disagree about certain things. It's not always religion. It could be about politics or life choices or just anything. And I'm not sure I feel like I'm on the defensive. Sometimes I wonder if the person is really listening to me, if we're talking past each other. There are a lot of things, but if they're friends that I'm having these discussions with, well, it's just a discussion. And maybe we will end the discussion still in disagreement, and that's okay. But why are you on the defensive? I feel like you think of this as a war or a battle, and somebody needs to win. Discussions don't have to be that way. Also, in the second sentence, you're in arguments and proofs, so this tells me that actually what you're trying to do is proselytize, not really listen to the other person. And if that's what you're doing, yes, you will miss the fact that this is a conversation. And then to wrap up just some initial thoughts on this, I wonder why you're worried about people's God belief when you're having these discussions if you're not trying to proselytize and if you think conversation is important. But my final thought is, do these conversations really happen like this? Or is this just feeding into this impression that Christians are persecuted or that everybody hates Christians or that atheists specifically hate you? I'm not sure that these conversations are actually happening unless, again, you're trying to proselytize. And if you're actively trying to proselytize, then you're bringing this on and maybe you should try a new approach. All right, enough of my blibbity blab about the initial thoughts. Let's get on to the questions. Number 1 is going to be a catch-all for a lot of things that this person calls the big questions. So we're going to take it one by one. But it starts out, if there is no God, the big questions, in quotes, remain unanswered. So how do we answer the following questions? So instead of being one question, we can see there are lots of other little questions. So the first, why is there something rather than nothing? This question was asked by Aristotle and Leibniz alike, albeit with differing answers. But it is an historic concern. Way to name drop a couple of philosophers and show that you know something about philosophizing and all that. But anyway, I don't know why there is something rather than nothing. Atheism itself is silent because all atheism says is there isn't a God. So the reason for that something has nothing to do with some supernatural being that we call a God. If I were more interested in this, I might look more into astrophysics, because those are the people that are studying the nature of the universe. You might also look into some philosophy, but I don't think that that's a good place to go. I think that the physical sciences are a place to go when you're asking questions like this. But more importantly, it's true that religion, and specifically Christianity, says that everything is here because of God, but that doesn't explain why God did this. What's the reasoning behind God? Why didn't he just keep us as spiritual beings? Why do we have this physical reality? None of that is really explained except to appeal to God's mystery. And the last thing I'll say on this is very simply that even though a religion like Christianity offers an explanation, that doesn't mean that that explanation is true. How did you determine that it was true, besides going to a book and saying, hey, here's a book? All right, next big question. Why is there conscious, intelligent life on this planet, and is there any meaning to this life? Okay, so first of all, these are two separate questions that have been smushed together into one. And the reason that there is conscious, intelligent life is because that's the way life evolved. It's just the way it went for various reasons. And if you want to know the steps to that, I would go look at biology and see what they say about evolution. As for, is there any meaning to this life has any meaning that you want it to have, or it can have no meaning. I have several commenters that tell me that they don't think life needs to have a meaning. We're just here doing stuff, and that's fine. All right, next big question. If there is meaning, what kind of meaning and how is it found? Now, from my perspective, it doesn't matter if you're religious or an atheist. You have to decide what the meaning of your life is. I know religious people will say that God gives them that meaning, but somewhere you had to decide that God was giving you that meaning. I mean, he didn't come down and tell you that. You had this idea pop into your head or somebody said something. So in the end, even religious people who are God believers who think they're getting their meaning from God, they actually have to make that decision for themselves. And so with atheists, it's the same. You decide what meaning your life has and you go out and look for it if you think you want your life to have meaning. Next big question. Does human history lead anywhere, or is it all in vain since death is merely the end? I think somebody doesn't understand what history is. History is stuff that happened in the past, or the way humans lived in the past. What are the accumulation of things that happened that we think led to other events? And you can see how certain things led to other events that led to today, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily going anywhere. I understand that for Christians there is this notion that there will be the end times, so the Bible sets all this up, although it definitely skips like millennia of stuff happening. But from a secular point of view, when we talk about history, history is a thing we construct about the past, so it doesn't have to go anywhere. And is all this in vain? I mean, I like to think about the fact that there are things that I'm experiencing now that are worth just experiencing them in the now. I like to plan for the future. I like to think about the past. I like to have meaning for my life. So for me, it's not going to be in vain, even though when I die, from my point of view, that's going to be the end. Nothing's going to happen. I'm not going anywhere. But that's why I live in the now and I try to get satisfaction, be happy, enjoy people and things now. I do have to say that for much of human history, this notion that your life is sort of like a bank account that you're investing in for an afterlife would make no sense. For them, they were mired in whatever was happening. They're not experiencing the notion that their life has some deeper meaning or anything like that. All right, enough of that. Next big question. How do you come to understand good and evil, right and wrong without a transcendent signifier? Absent humans doing things in the world, for me, these things don't exist. Good and right define actions that I think benefit people, human beings, animals, the planet. And evil and wrong are things that do harm. And we can actually define them, make criteria for these. In other words, these aren't things that actually exist like a rock or a bird or something like that. These are ways of describing how humans are acting in the world or how they are because of their actions. And therefore, they're completely human-centered and we don't need anything beyond humans. All right, we're going on to the next big question because it still concerns this notion of good and evil. If these concepts are merely social constructions or human opinions, whose opinion does one trust in determining what is good or bad, right or wrong? Well, from my point of view, we all have to construct these notions, and we construct them in our communities, in our families, in our societies, in our countries, and all of that. And we might have differing ideas because we're human beings. We're going to have different ideas. But we try to do the best we can if we are in good faith and if we want to think about what these things mean and how to create a better world. We do this with other human beings. But there is not a single human or a single being that would determine this. If there is a deity up there that is a transcendent thing that is determining these, why do people have vastly different understandings of what these things are across time and space? Christians, who all are supposed to have the same religion and believe in the same God, have very different ideas. So I don't even know, as a Christian, who would you go to say, who has the best idea about what God is thinking? God isn't coming down here and saying anything, so you as human beings are deciding what you think God wants. And what the convenient thing is for Christians is, if I question why you believe the way you do, you can punt this to, well, this is what I read in my book. And I've talked to lots of Christians, and they have lots of different opinions about what constitutes right, wrong, good, bad, and they're all saying God told them. As somebody who doesn't believe in this God, I have no way to parse out all of these different opinions and decide which Christian is actually speaking for God. Keep in mind, I don't believe in God anyway. But it seems to me that good evidence for a God would be, hey, everybody who believes in the God has the same opinion. He's downloaded that opinion, but it doesn't happen. So even then, even Christians are basing their concepts of good and evil on their own thinking. There you go. All right, last big question in this section. If you are content within atheism, what circumstances would serve to make you open to other answers? I always find this odd. First of all, I am not within atheism. Atheism just describes one of my beliefs, or actually one of my lack of beliefs. I don't believe in a God, so I describe myself as an atheist. Where I go to get answers to other questions, like a lot of the answers that are here, I go to different fields. I look at philosophy, I look at science, I look at psychology, I study all kinds of things. I'm a humanist, so my ethics come from there, and so on and so forth. So I am open to all answers. It's not like atheism is a system. Everybody say it with me. Atheism is not a belief system. It is one belief. So there you go. I'm not within atheism. I really don't care about it. I wouldn't care about defining myself if I didn't see Christians all around trying to change the laws and do all kinds of things to make life harder for people who don't believe in their religion. But anyway, I'm open to other answers. Come tell me, show me what you got. Let's move on to 2, and keep in mind we've already answered way more than 6, but we're going on to number 2. If we reject the existence of God, we are left with a crisis of meaning. So why don't we see more atheists like Jean-Paul Sartre or Friedrich Nietzsche or Michel Foucault? These 3 philosophers, who also embraced atheism, recognized that in the absence of God, there was no transcendent meaning beyond one's own self-interests, pleasures, or tastes. The crisis of atheistic meaninglessness is depicted in Sartre's book Nausea. Without God, there is a crisis of meaning, and these 3 thinkers, among others, show us a world of just stuff thrown out into space and time, going nowhere, meaning nothing. I guess the main question here is, why aren't more people like Sartre, Nietzsche, and Foucault? And my answer is, I don't know. I'm not even sure it's true. I know for a fact that Camus was another philosopher/author who dealt with this problem, so I know that there's at least one other person out there. But it's an odd question because we talked about the issue of meaning above, and we said we make our own meaning. But I think the real purpose behind this question, such that it is to make atheism seem like some empty system that will mean that you yourself can't enjoy your life and find that meaning and purpose, that you can't look for it, it has to be given to you by a God, and that's just not true. I think that most people can find meaning and purpose in these things like your family, your career, your friends, enjoying things. This little word just in just stuff and then thrown out into space and time, going nowhere, meaning nothing. I think it's all supposed to make us feel anguish that we don't need to feel. When we're in the present moment, when we're doing things that give us satisfaction, that should be enough. I have to mention a few things about Sartre specifically, and a little on Foucault. I don't know that much about Nietzsche's life, but I have done a lot of reading on Sartre. My expertise happens to be in 20th century French literature, and Sartre covers a lot of the middle of that century. He didn't have a life that was full of despair. Part of the idea of existentialism is to recognize that there is nothing but our own lives, and to create meaning, you have to create a project. And there's a play on words in the French of throwing yourself forward, because a project is to throw forward. You're throwing yourself forward with the project that you take on. You know, Sartre traveled, he wrote a lot, he met a lot of people, he did a lot of great things, and so this notion that he found life meaningless is just ridiculous. And that's the same for Michel Foucault. Again, another writer who had a whole philosophical system that people still use today. I think there's just so much misunderstanding of what these philosophers were saying and what they were doing, because if you are a religious person reading these and you want to embrace your religion, this kind of throws a wrench into the works of what you believe. I also just want to say a brief word on Sartre's book, Nausea. For starters, it's a novel. It's not a philosophical treatise. It's not where he lays out his philosophical thinking. The philosophical thinking plays into the storyline, and it does have some issues of meaninglessness involved in there. But it's not the be-all and end-all of the things that Sartre wrote. It's not even the most important thing. It's maybe his most well-known thing, but he's got a lot of other stuff out there. But it also deals with the stifling nature of the bourgeois culture in France in this interwar period. So it's not just about the meaninglessness of life, and we'll leave it at that. I don't know why that's name dropped here. There are so many other things of Sartre that you could read that are actually better if you were interested. Then again, maybe it's just the title that is of interest here, and us thinking that nausea is connected with being an atheist, that you will feel sick because your life has no meaning. All right, so to wrap up number 2, we have the name drop of some philosophers to show that we're really smarty pants. We have an emphasis on the meaninglessness of life if we leave Christianity or religiosity or whatever. And we have some implication maybe that if we leave Christianity, then we're hedonists just out for pleasure. And if you're really interested in looking at the meaning of life and discussing this, you know, that's really cool, but I don't get the impression that that's what we're doing here. All right, enough said about number 2. Let's go on to number 3. When people have embraced atheism, the historical results can be horrific, as in the regimes of Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot, who saw religion as the problem and worked to eradicate it. There's a question mark here, but that isn't a question. That is a statement. All right, let's keep going and see where we get to a question. In other words, what set of actions are consistent with particular belief commitments? I'm not even sure what that's asking, given our setup. It could be argued that these behaviors of the regimes in question are more consistent with the implications of atheism. Well, there's a statement. Though I'm thankful that many of the atheists I know do not live the implications of these beliefs out for themselves like others did, exclamation point, for some reason. It could be argued that the socio-political ideologies could very well be the outworking of a particular set of beliefs, beliefs that posit the ideal state as an atheistic one. This is sort of a mishmash of things, and I guess by innuendo we're supposed to understand that if God isn't looking over us, then we'll just go kill a bunch of people. That's what I'm getting here anyway. But I think everybody that is watching this channel knows that Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot were motivated by more than just atheism. Like, they didn't kill in the name of there not being a God. That was part of the state that they set up, and it's a lot more complicated than that. I mean, you really want to get on a question like this with a friend, like you're just in conversation with a friend and let's go talk about murder and genocide? Like, come on. But why do Christians overlook all the times when Christianity was the reason for the war and the genocide and the killing? And of course, there were the Crusades, but there were also lots of religious wars fought in Europe over Christianity and what kind of Christianity was the right kind of Christianity. And then, you know, hey, what's going on in Israel right now and forever and always, also based on religion. And there are things going on in India for that reason. And just on and on. Why don't you deal with the times that religion is used as an excuse to kill a whole other group of people? What I think we come down with is that people sometimes do horrific things in the name of their beliefs. We'll just end it right there. But, you know, if you're a Christian listening to this, you know, I wouldn't go there if you're trying to proselytize. Like, don't go saying like, hey, atheists killed a bunch of people in these regimes. Because guess what? Christians killed a bunch of people too throughout history, and they could do it again. Number 4. If there is no God, the problems of evil and suffering are in no way solved. So where is the hope of redemption or meaning for those who suffer? Suffering is just as tragic, if not more so, without God, because there is no hope of ultimate justice, or of the suffering being rendered meaningful or transcendent, redemptive or redeemable. It might be true that there is no God to blame now, but neither is there a God to reach out to for strength, transcendent meaning, or comfort. Why would we seek the alleviation of suffering without objective morality grounded in a God of justice? So tell me you don't understand the problem of evil without telling me you don't understand the problem of evil. And also tell me you don't have empathy without telling me you don't have empathy. The problem of evil and suffering have to do with the idea that if there is a tri-omni God, why do these things exist? If he loves us and he wants what's best, why is this the way he decided to accomplish it? So Christians usually say things like, well, we have free will and God wanted us to have free will. Or they punt to mystery. Oh, God works in mysterious ways. But the point is, if this loving God could do anything and he's all powerful, then why didn't he make this world better? Why is there so much evil and suffering? And evil in this case is people doing bad things. It's not like literal evil, again, like we talked about a couple of questions back. And it's not just about free will. Why are there volcanoes and tornadoes and tsunamis and all manner of things that cause a lot of harm in people's lives? Why is that part of this perfect plan? And as for us as atheists, well, we live in a physical world where these are the forces of nature that we evolved in. People don't always act in other people's interests. We do have people who are sociopaths. People make mistakes. There are all kinds of things in a natural physical world that mean that there is going to be pain and suffering and, frankly, people doing bad things. So I guess for this writer, the fact that there is heaven and hell or whatever, the afterlife and God's perfect justice and Jesus dying on the cross so that we could go to heaven, I guess that's what quote-unquote redeems the evil. But the question comes back to, why is that the way that God decided that things needed to happen? Why is there this pain and suffering? Now, I have to say, apparently this person thinks that if you reach out to God, that's going to give you strength or meaning or comfort. And this apparently doesn't happen for everybody. And there are a lot of atheists out there with tales to tell about how they suffered and God didn't do anything and did not comfort them and did not give them strength. And I certainly never felt anything like that, either when I was literally a Catholic or after I left Catholicism, but was still like a nominal believer in God. But where I did find strength and comfort was in other people. And I have to say, that is where I think we should seek the alleviation of suffering. And this is why, for me, this is what I want us to strive for on earth, is to have better systems for people who need help, who maybe don't have anybody in their lives. But this is also reason to be a little kinder, a little more patient with each other. Basically, for me, we are it. We are all that there is, so that if somebody does have a disaster happen, then I would like systems set up so they can rebuild their life. And I would like there to be people there to comfort them and help them and hear their tales and all of that. To sum up, we're it. We need to help each other. We need to be there for each other. Question 5. If there is no God, we lose the very standard by which we critique religions and religious people. So whose opinion matters most? I don't know why we lose the standard. Like, we can make that judgment. Ugh. Whose voice will be heard? Probably the loudest. I'm getting sarcastic now, but this is just annoying. Okay, back to the paragraph. Whose taste or preferences will be honored? In the long run, human tastes and opinions have no more weight than we give them. And who are we to give them meaning anyway? Well, I just said in question 4 that we're all that there is, so we are the ones to give them meaning. Okay, I'm on a tangent again. All right. Who is to say that lying or cheating or adultery or child molestation are wrong, really wrong? You've got to be kidding me. This has got to be a joke. Where do these standards come from? They come from us. Sure, our societies might make these things illegal and impose penalties and consequences for things that are not socially acceptable. I'm going to go on a limb and say that child molestation is more than just not socially acceptable. Hey, but is that me? But human cultures have at various times legally or socially disapproved of everything from believing in God to believing the world revolves around the sun, from slavery to interracial marriage, from polygamy to monogamy. Human taste, opinion, law, and culture are hardly dependable arbiters of truth. And do you know what is funny about that is probably most of the people alive believed in a God and thought that they were using God to decide these things. You know, I know that because religious people posit that there is a God who has decided these things for us, the Christian God specifically, creating our moral standards. Therefore, there is one standard. But I'm going to go back to what I said earlier is Christians do not agree on these things. Christians have lots of denominations and have come down on these issues in different ways at different times. You're the one that's bringing up slavery here. Christians were slave owners. Christians supported slavery. Slavery is regulated in the Bible, in the Old Testament specifically, and both Jesus and Paul said that was okay. They said that, slaves obey your masters, even the bad ones, paraphrase. And that's just Christianity. There are a lot of other religions. So going back to what I said, humans are the standard by which we can critique anything and everything. We're the ones that set up the parameters. And yes, things change across time and people disagree. As to whose opinion matters most, it's probably going to be the person that's talking at the time. I guess I see this as human lives are messy, our ethical lives can be messy, and just talking about the legality or illegality of something, that doesn't have to do necessarily with moral issues, because things like traffic laws really aren't moral issues. Moral issues are things that have to do with how we treat each other. And things can be legal that are just heinous, like slavery. Anyway, this is not to say that any of this is easy, it's just we have to have conversations. This is why the whole area of philosophy exists, to talk about these things and to make good reasons about things. This is why we have psychology, so that we can understand how people work, or sociology to understand how groups work. This is why we have politics, why we have things like parliaments and congresses and presidents and balances of power and judicial areas and all kinds of stuff. We humans get together and we discuss it, and hopefully we listen to each other along the way and we try to make the best rules and regulations, etc. Number 6. If there is no God, we don't make sense. So how do we explain human longings and desire for the transcendent? How do we even explain human questions for meaning and purpose, or inner thoughts like, why do I feel unfulfilled or empty? Why do we hunger for the spiritual? And how do we explain these longings if nothing can exist beyond the material world? This is just asking questions gone wild. If we're really interested in exploring what makes us human and why do we have the kinds of feelings and desires that we have this whole field called psychology. And then there's also this field called philosophy, where people explore these issues as well. What I will say is I'm not quite sure that I am looking for the transcendent, depending on how you define the transcendent. I'm certainly not hungering for something supernatural. I do like feeling connection with other people and with the universe. I like looking up and thinking, what an amazing place this is, but I don't have to connect it with some God creator or anything like that. And I don't hunger for anything spiritual. When I was younger, I did, and I see that as a function of the fact that I was raised in a religious family, but I grew out of that as I did not see that bearing any fruit. I don't see why we would need a God to make sense of who we are. I think we can look to how we exist in community, how we evolved, how we grew up and were socialized in certain ways. And the God is often a part of that, so you might think that's just a natural part of everything and you have this God-shaped something within you. But that's not necessarily true. Just because you have that feeling now doesn't mean that that's part of your biology. Humans have been exploring these issues and thinking these deep thoughts for a long time. That's why philosophy dates back quite a while to all kinds of old Greek guys who died millennia ago. Let's just summarize with, you can't explain it without a God if you want to look. So at the bottom of these questions, we see that this article is excerpted from Brian McLaren's book, Finding Faith, a self-discovery guide for your spiritual quest, taken from the chapter, Can I Believe in Atheism? And overlooking the fact that there is no question mark in that question, atheism is not something that you believe in. Atheism is a description of a lack of belief. Let's all say it one more time. Atheism is not a belief system. It is not a worldview. Alright, that's what I got for you this time. Tell me what you thought, what struck you. Put those in the comments below, and while you're down there you can like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff. Love it when you do all the YouTube stuff, and if you like what I do, you can buy me a coffee. That link is in the description below as well. Who knows what next time will bring, but hopefully it will be sarcastic. See you then.